Fish and chips, a dish hugely popular in the UK, at every seaside resort, in every town, every city, multiple thousands spread across the UK. But what do fish and chips have in relation to this clip?
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who bringeth forth bread from the earth.
In this video, I'll be showing the relation between fish and chips and the mocking of Jesus Christ.
You may have seen a symbol often called the Jesus fish. It looks like this.
Before we get into this and other like things, the Jesus symbol and how it relates to fish and chips, there'll be a lot of viewers that aren't based in the UK, and fish and chips won't be a hugely popular dish. So let's take a little look at the history of fish and chips in the UK. However, I am aware that Americans especially will be familiar with such things as fish fries.
I don't think you understand how badly I want to be in this video. I want to be where the fish fry is happening.
It's the Friday night favourite, the dish you can eat without using a knife and fork. And it's Britain's most loved and most popular takeaway. It's fish and chips. Fish and chips became popular as a late-night post-pub feast for men before becoming the time-saving midday meal of factory and foundry workers, as well as a payday treat for families at the end of the working week.
80% of the British population say they visit a fish and chip shop at least once a year, and we consume 382 million meals from the chippy per annum. That's pretty impressive for a combination that's only been with us for around 150 years. For the first fish and chip shop only appeared in around 1860. Separately, both fried fish and chips were enjoyed by the British well before they came together. Chips as a term for something edible was in use in the 18th century, often in relation, rather curiously, to oranges. Orange chips were candied chunks of peel. It was in the same century that the potato was going from nobbly curiosity to staple food, especially for the poor. And given how well potatoes lend themselves to deep frying, it was inescapable that potato chips would soon be on the scene. Fried fish, meanwhile, was also on the tables of the rich and the poor. Breadcrumbed fillets, delicately fried in butter and garnished with fried parsley, were a staple for upmarket meals. But there was another place fried fish could be bought, and that in the Jewish quarters of London and other big cities. There, Sephardic Jews sold cold fried fish intended for eating on the Sabbath when no cooking was allowed in Jewish homes. It was inevitable that these two street foods, so popular with the masses, would end up being sold in combination. It proved a winning formula, and fish and chip shops took off immediately.
It's a north-south divide. Debate and counterclaim surrounds the answer to the question, who opened the first fish and chip shop? Some say it was Jewish immigrant Joseph Malin, who opened one in Cleveland Street in East London. Others say it was entrepreneur John Lees, who sold fish and chips out of a wooden hut at Mossley Market in Lancashire.
By 1910, there were 25,000 fish and chip shops in the UK, and by 1929, there were 10,000 more. Across the UK, accompaniments vary, from the mushy peas of the north to curry sauce, ketchup, mayonnaise, or the chip shop spice, which is on every counter in Hull. Salt and vinegar remain the staples. In the 21st century, chippy vegetable fats have often replaced beef dripping or lard for frying. Newspaper used to be the wrapping of choice, outlawed unless fresh from the printers and unsullied by readers' hands in 1968. Now it's mainly plain paper and polystyrene, but the skillful wrapping and excitement of unwrapping remains. And when it's good, well, it's crispy and fluffy with a hit of vinegar and the punch of salt. It's unbeatable.
During the Second World War, ministers made sure that fish and chips were one of the few foods that weren't rationed. Author George Orwell wrote in The Road to Wigan Pier that fish and chips were first among home comforts and kept the masses happy. At this time, there was a fish and chip shop on the corner of most streets in the UK, and the dish was becoming a firm favourite for seaside day trippers and holidaymakers. 7 million portions of fish and chips are consumed every week in the UK, 380 million portions a year. There are 8 fish and chip shops to every McDonald's restaurant in the UK, and now the dish has gone global. It's a favourite around the world and a must-have on the bucket list for visitors to the UK.
I was sitting outside of a chippy in Weston a couple of years ago for about an hour meditating, and Jeff was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just looking at that fish and chip shop. There's something in the sign and I can't get it. All I can get is the IHS, which is in the fish, and the IHS represents Jesus. I know the fish also represents Jesus. I'm like, there's something more here, babe. And then I'm like, chips, if we flip the C to an S, because I know that's an easily changeable letter, and that's how they hide stuff. It makes ships. And ships and fish come from ships. And I was like, this is a bit weird. And I was like, we've got the maritime going on. We've got the sea and the land, because you've got the potatoes, which come from the ground, the land. You've got the fish, which comes from the sea. So you've got the land and the sea merge in the maritime law. But I see the fish more as a Jesus Christ. So the fish and chip shops in England are spread all around. You find them in every town, city. About how big they are in the UK, everyone eats them, kids love them. They've been around for hundreds of years. Well, 100 years, massive traditional dish for the UK. But then going about the more unseen side, how the fish represents Jesus. And I was thinking about how they slice open the fish and fillet him, cut him up. And that was what started with Jesus. And then generally the fish is battered. And it's battered again in the flour, but we've already covered all the flour and everything, but it's made into a batter. Remember, batter is battery, so it's like battered. Because I've got this from a salt and battery and a salt.
With a hit of vinegar and a punch of salt, it's unbeatable.
Battery and a salt, like you put salt on something, it's fucking mad, innit? So you batter it and then you fry it. Frying, obviously, there's a lot of representations with that, but what I find interesting about the frying is the oil. The oil is almost a reversal of what they say it is. So the holy oil and all this oil that Jesus, representing to Jesus, actually fries the fish and turns it into its form, its hard, battered form. And the chips alongside it, the chips, you don't normally get many in the UK, so I'm thinking maybe the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ that surround him. But what makes it more interesting, when the fish goes on the paper, remember the paper's white in the UK, I don't know if you have fish and chips over there, they put it in white paper. This represents the linen cloth, again, that Jesus was put in the Shroud of Turin. And the fish sticks to the paper. And again, like I said about the cheese leaving its imprint on the cloth, the fish leaves its imprint on the white paper, and you have to almost pull it off, and it always leaves the back end of the batter on. Prior to this, it's salted, and you get salt vinegar poisoning if you want. So vinegar was put in Jesus' mouth when he was walking to the cross. I find that significant. And then the salt is like the assault and battery. So we've got the battery, and the assault comes after the assault. You assault it, you salt it. So you've got all these things going on, and it's wrapped in 8. And it edges on to the mockery of Jesus and all of this that's going on symbolically constantly.
Master, send the people away, so that then they can go to the villages and farms around here and find food and lodging. This is a lonely place.
You yourselves give them something to eat.
But all we have are 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who bringeth forth bread from the earth.
Dickens mentions a fried fish warehouse in Oliver Twist. During this time, fish would be served with either bread or baked potatoes.
The links are astonishing, aren't they? Too linked to just be coincidental. You heard a voice note to Erica in regards to my thoughts of the relation between fish and chips and Jesus Christ. Essentially the mocking of Jesus Christ. It seems to be the whole process involved with the fish and chip shops is the process involved of the ritual and story of Jesus Christ. Other points which I didn't cover in the voice note. In the UK, orange chips are a huge thing. Chips in orange batter, they make it more crispy, crunchy, and a particular taste to it. Not until I did the research around this did I find out that chips actually originate from candied orange chips. How crazy is it that we now have orange chips in the UK also? I'm pretty sure people wouldn't be aware of the link until hearing it on this video, just like myself until doing the research. Strange and peculiar. But just like the battery and the salt that I brought up, the battery of the fish and then the salting of the fish related to the Jesus Christ ritual, I also thought bread and butter was interesting. If we change the B at the beginning of bread and butter, it's to read and to utter. There's also a saying in the UK, as cheap as chips.
At West London's Hooked Fish and Chips, shop owner Bally Singh is struggling to keep the tills ringing. Faced with skyrocketing inflation, he has seen the price of everything, from cooking oil to flour, go up. Singh has tried to absorb most of that pain, but some costs get passed on to the customer.
4 pence in today's money is what it would have cost you to sit down at the first fish and chip restaurant owned by Sam Isaacs in Whitechapel in London and be served bread and butter and tea with your fish and chips.
As chips in the UK used to be very cheap, these days it's probably £3, £4 for a single bag. The pricing's astonishing, they are no longer cheap as chips to say. But the saying caught my attention, and I think it highlights and adds value even more to what I'm saying. Cheap as chips. Cheap sounds like sheep. Sheep as chips. So if we take in consideration what I've said about Jesus being the fish, the chips are simply his followers. Sheep as chips. Also related to the chip shop is the condiments, which was in the introduction video which I provided. Often mushy peas or tomato sauce and other sauces are ate alongside the dish. I thought, what could this be an analogy of? Obviously tomato sauce, the first thing that comes up is blood. The relation to blood.
Now you can take thick, rich Heinz, America's favorite ketchup, and give it a squeeze.
When we're squirting tomato sauce over everything, it's a symbology of the blood and the representation of that. Other sides, such as crushed peas, mushy peas in the UK, these are peas that are left out on the field to dry, and the drying process, which I showed in Jesus is the Way video, is also associated to hanging on a cross. The drying or hanging, it often happens over a surface or facility that is like a cross. Essentially, the peas undergo a similar process.
Hey P, remember the good old days on the farm? Remember your pod and all the little peas that you grew up with? Don't you miss them? Right, next. Hey P, remember the good old... Nobody makes peas mushy like bachelors.
And as I've shown in the fish and chip symbol itself, a lot of them have the plus sign in the middle. Plus for me is a way to hide the cross, adding even more value to what I'm saying. Further up to the plus sign is the and sign. The and symbol, if you flip it, you can easily see it's a mockery, the spear or lance entering the side of Jesus. Either or work. The mockery and evil, I think, runs even further, with the first 2 letters of fish and chips, the F and the C, being the 6th and 3rd letter of the alphabet, and 6 3s are 18, or 666. The word Pisces can almost be found a very close anagram within the letters of fish and chips. The signs of fish and water related to Jesus Christ. The rolling planet of Neptune, and local to me there is a chip shop called Neptune Fish Bar. Until the research, I never knew the relation.
The Jesus fish symbol is an acronym in Greek. This is a very ancient symbol that early Christians used in the Roman Empire to avoid persecution.
But when we take the F and the C from fish and chips, it leaves ISH and HIPS. Again, we can see the IHS resembled twice. And when we look at the Christogram, it's normally composed of letters X, P, I, X, presented as IHS. So with the remaining letters of fish, we get the perfect anagram of IHS. With chips, there is a remaining P, but the P makes sense as the P is often represented in the Christogram itself. IHS is also an anagram of his, like history. So IHS, Jesus, the saviour of humankind, is ultimately symbolically being shown in the chip shop or the fish and chip shop as being killed and ate, consumed. A further insight to this would be what comes from fish. Fish generally contains omega-3. Higher forms are often represented as the alpha and omega, and fish contains omega-3. The 3 could highlight the Trinity, Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So what is the purpose of this video? If you yourself know exactly what ritual you are undergoing whilst undertaking an action, it is up to you whether you undertake that ritual or not, instead of being blind to it. The purpose of this channel has always been to have deeper conversations regarding deeper thoughts, and that brings flexibility and ease. Ultimately, that is all we are doing, talking about the deeper thoughts which lead to deeper conversations. Myself bringing insights which were previously not seen, to allow further sparks within yourself to see what once wasn't saw. Love and light to all.
One thing further, there's a scene in Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, one of my favourite movies. I've put it in one of the recent ones, the alchemical one, when I talk about your urine, that's what it's from. And in the end, he makes the perfect perfume.
This is no man! This is an angel!
And he tips it on himself. Before that, everyone has an orgasm and believes they're in heaven, but he tips it on themselves. And because everyone thinks he's a god and so pure, they consume him, they eat him until there's nothing left. And it just takes me back to the fish and chips itself, and it makes me think something that no one's ever spoke about, but I always keep seeing us as food lately. What about if Jesus was consumed? And I don't think I'd put it in this video, but it's a very deeper question. At the end of the day, we know the power of blood, we know the power of potential of cannibalism.
Now his blood is in my body.
Yes, sir.
It's in there. His blood is mixed with my blood. Can you see it?
Will you think about eating the heart of Jesus Christ if this was a real man and drinking his blood? The old scenes of eating a dragon's heart and all this shit remind me of what I'm talking about. And it would almost be how the batter's left on the fish and chips after you've ate the fish and ate the chip. I know it's just an analogy, the eating is the death of them, but something further than that with all the talking, and we know how powerful blood is. It just wouldn't make sense to me that they would discard that body and just leave it. They would have fucking harvested that shit. They knew about the power of the blood and the power of all that shit back then. They would have at least dissected him and found out more about him if he was that powerful. Do you know what I mean? So that's a really deep one, but I don't even know if it warrants putting it on the video because it might just completely fuck it up for all the religious people. But the essence of what I'm talking about, just generally forget that with the fish and chips and the decoding of the fish and how it relates to Jesus, I think is brilliant. The harvesting and the mocking of Jesus Christ. That then relates onto the English Sunday roast, which is a collection of all vegetables and meats. If you go to a carvery, you generally have every type of meat available: lamb, pork, chicken, beef. You have every type of vegetable available, including potatoes and then gravy. So that, to me, in some senses, is almost the grand harvesting of the world. It's everything that comes to harvest on that Sunday. The collection of all types of everything. Whereas You know, some things are classed as carrots, some classed as peas, some potatoes. There would be an analogy for it all, but the Sunday roast is to get the collection and the harvesting of the whole fucking world, you know what I'm saying? So I felt like with the fish and chips one, because it probably wouldn't be that long, it might be about 7 minutes long, add on the back end about the Sunday roast in the UK and how that relates to the grand harvesting of the world.